Louis XVI, born Louis-Auguste on August 23, 1754, in the opulent Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, entered the world as the second surviving son of Louis, Dauphin of France, and Maria Josepha of Saxony, whose 1747 marriage, arranged to secure Saxony's allegiance against Prussia in the intricate web of European alliances, was a union of genuine affection overshadowed by the heartbreaking realities of 18th-century medicine, with Maria Josepha enduring 13 pregnancies but losing 6 children to rampant diseases like smallpox, measles, or congenital weaknesses that no royal privilege could fully shield against. Titled Duke of Berry at birth, Louis-Auguste was initially relegated to the shadows of succession, as his parents lavished attention on his elder brother, Louis-Joseph Xavier François, born September 15, 1751, who was meticulously groomed for the throne with lessons in diplomacy, equestrian skills, and the intricate protocols of Bourbon court life, embodying the ideal heir until tuberculosis ravaged his young body, diagnosed around age 7 with persistent fevers, bloody coughs, and wasting away despite desperate treatments like leechings, herbal poultices, and ass's milk regimens popular among physicians like Clement and Lasson, culminating in his tragic death on March 22, 1761, at Versailles, where his small corpse was displayed in the Salle de Gardes for courtiers to pay respects in a somber ritual of mourning. Another brother, Xavier Marie Joseph, born September 8, 1753, succumbed to convulsions at just 6 months, buried quietly in the royal necropolis, and the family's sorrows deepened when their father, the Dauphin, fell victim to tuberculosis on December 20, 1765, at the Château de Fontainebleau, confined to a separate wing fumigated with vinegar and camphor to contain the miasma. His death at age 36 thrusting the 11-year-old Louis-Auguste into the role of Dauphin amid a court still reeling from the losses. His mother, Maria Josepha, devastated and frail from years of grief and multiple births, contracted the same insidious disease while devotedly nursing her husband, passing away on March 13, 1767, at age 35, her body interred hastily at the Basilica of Saint Denis to avert further contagion, leaving Louis-Auguste and his surviving siblings, Louis Stanislas Xavier, Count of Provence, future Louis XVIII, Charles Philippe, Count of Artois, future Charles X, and sisters Marie Clotilde, future Queen of Sardinia, and Elizabeth, executed during the Terror, as orphans in the vast, echoing halls of Versailles, where the weight of dynasty pressed heavily upon them. Immersed in the palace's 700-room expanse, boasting 2,153 windows, 67 grand staircases, Le Nôtre's meticulously manicured 2,000-acre gardens with 200,000 trees, 50 ornate fountains fed by the machine de Marly's pumps, and a menagerie of exotic animals including elephants and rhinoceroses gifted from foreign potentates, Louis-Auguste navigated a childhood governed by the stifling etiquette of the Ancien Regime, the daily livre ceremony where 100 nobles observed his awakening and dressing, the grand covert public dinners under chandeliers of Bohemian crystal, and a staff of 1,200, from Swiss guards in blue uniforms to clock-winders maintaining 400 timepieces, ensuring every moment reinforced royal isolation. His education, rigorously overseen by the Duc de la Vauguyon, Paul-François de Caillen de Stewart de Caussade, appointed governor of the children of France from 1760 until Louis-Auguste's marriage in 1770, was a conservative regimen emphasizing religious piety, moral rectitude, and the humanities to forge a devout monarch, drawing from Jacques-Bénigne Bossuet's treatises on divine right kingship while instilling the value of concealing one's thoughts to preserve an aura of inscrutability, a lesson from tutors like the Abbé Jacques Berthier, provincial of the Augustinians, who taught timidity as a virtue for rulers, and the Abbé Jean-Paul Timoleon de Casse-Brissac, who reinforced emotional restraint, potentially sowing the seeds of his later chronic indecisiveness in matters of state. Specialized instructors included Jacob Nicolas Moreau, historiographer royal, who immersed him in French chronicles glorifying saints like Louis IX and warriors like Clovis, Jérôme Lefrançois de Lalande, the renowned astronomer, who guided stargazing sessions with the palace's rooftop telescopes to chart constellations and calculate eclipses, Abbé de Radenvilliers, drilling fluency in Latin for reading Cicero and Virgil, Italian for Dante, English for Locke and Newton, and German inherited from his mother, César Vauchier for mathematics, applying geometry to fortification designs, and the mathematician Abbé Leblond, who praised his aptitude for calculus and physics. Demonstrating a prodigious memory, Louis-Auguste recited entire genealogies of European houses and compiled a detailed 1780 atlas of France's 1,200-mile coastline, complete with harbors and currents to aid naval strategy, while his practical inclinations led to an apprenticeship in locksmithing under master craftsman François Gamine, forging elaborate escutcheon locks, puzzle mechanisms, and even a safe with hidden compartments in his private third-floor workshop equipped with forges, anvils, and vices, a therapeutic hobby that provided escape from court factions but was later ridiculed in revolutionary caricatures as the pursuits of the locksmith king, unfit for governance. He also dabbled in masonry, initiated into a Versailles lodge in 1777 alongside Enlightenment figures like Benjamin Franklin during his Paris embassy, embracing ideals of fraternity and reason that subtly influenced his reformist leanings. An avid hunter, he documented 1,274 expeditions between 1774 and 1789 in meticulous leather-bound journals, pursuing stags, boars, and foxes across the 35,000-acre forests of Compiègne and Rambouillet with a pack of 40 hounds bred from English foxhounds, often accompanied by his brothers, Provence, a corpulent intellectual fond of intrigue and libraries, and Artois, a dashing athlete known for his amorous escapades, honing his marksmanship with engraved flintlock rifles crafted by Versailles. Gunsmiths, building a towering 6-foot, 3-inch frame with broad shoulders from hours of riding and fencing, though his high-pitched voice, nearsighted squint requiring spectacles for reading dispatches, and occasional clumsiness in social settings betrayed a shy, introspective nature more suited to scholarly pursuits than the cutthroat politics of the court. His grandfather, Louis XV, who had ascended at age 5 in 1715 under the regency of Philippe d'Orléans, squandered his early moniker, the Beloved, through humiliating military defeats in the War of the Austrian Succession, 1740–1748, where France lost valuable Flemish territories and trade concessions, and the global 7 Years' War, 1756–1763, which stripped the kingdom of vast colonial holdings including New France, Canada, Louisiana, and Indian trading posts, amassing a staggering 4 billion livre debt equivalent to 2 decades of tax revenue, while the court's annual 36 million livre expenditures funded a lavish lifestyle of hunting lodges like the Grand Trianon and mistresses such as the influential Marquise de Pompadour, who patronized Voltaire and the Encyclopédie until her 1764 death from pneumonia, and the controversial Comtesse du Barry, elevated from humble origins in 1769 with scandals involving forged noble titles, a 700,000 livre diamond necklace from Baimer, and whispered poison plots, all of which Louis-Auguste, with his devout Catholic upbringing and aversion to scandal, viewed with quiet disapproval, yet received scant personal guidance from the aging king, preoccupied with secret diplomacy like the 1756 diplomatic revolution allying France with longtime rival Austria against Prussia and Britain. To fortify this Franco-Austrian bond, crucial after the loss of colonial prestige, Louis-Auguste was betrothed at age 11 to the vivacious Archduchess Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna of Austria, born November 2, 1755, the youngest of Empress Maria Theresa's 16 children, raised in the informal elegance of Vienna's Hofburg Palace with lessons in harp playing, dance, and French etiquette tailored for her destined role as Dauphine. Their proxy wedding took place on April 19, 1770, in Vienna's Augustinerkirche with her brother Archduke Ferdinand as stand-in, followed by the grand formal ceremony on May 16, 1770, in Versailles' Royal Chapel, officiated by the Archbishop of Reims amid 5,000 guests, featuring Marie Antoinette's gown embroidered with 20 carats of diamonds. A banquet in Ange-Jacques Gabriel's newly inaugurated Royal Opera House with silver service for 200, and fireworks by the Italian pyrotechnists Ruggieri. That tragically sparked a panic and stampede in Paris's Place Louis XV, now Place de la Concorde, resulting in 132 deaths and 133 injuries due to inadequate crowd barriers and lighting, an ominous harbinger for a marriage fraught with public anti-Austrian prejudice, stoked by libels portraying the bride as a Habsburg spy or L'Autrichian, and private challenges including Louis-Auguste's physiological condition of phimosis, a tight foreskin causing discomfort that delayed full consummation. Until a minor surgical intervention around July 1777, though tentative intimacy reportedly began in July 1773, fueling nearly 8 years of vicious court gossip, infertility accusations, and underground pamphlets like, "Can the King Do It?" or "Les Amours de Charlot et Toinette," circulated by black market printers in the Palais Royal arcades. Over time, their relationship blossomed into mutual affection, with shared interests in music, Marie Antoinette composing simple airs on her harp, and family life, yielding 4 live births amid elaborate court christenings. Marie-Therese Charlotte, Madame Royale, December 19, 1778, following her uncle Emperor Joseph II's blunt advisory visit on marital matters. Louis-Joseph Xavier François, Dauphin, October 22, 1781, celebrated with 101 gun salutes and nationwide Te Deum services in cathedrals. Louis Charles, Duke of Normandy, March 27, 1785, during Easter festivities with godparents including Swedish King Gustav III, and Sophie Helene Beatrice, July 9, 1786, who tragically died of tuberculosis at 11 months on June 19, 1787, buried in St. Denis amid the couple's profound grief that drew them closer. Additionally, reflecting Louis XVI's compassionate nature influenced by Christian charity, they adopted 6 orphaned or impoverished children, including Armand François Michel Gagny, a street beggar discovered in 1776 and educated at court until his 1792 death in the army; Jean Amilcar, an enslaved Senegalese boy gifted by Madame de Polignac in 1787, freed and pensioned but abandoned during the Revolution; Ernestine Lambriquet, daughter of a chambermaid, raised alongside Marie-Therese as a playmate; Zoe Jean-Louise Victoire, a foundling from 1789, and 2 others, Mousseline and a peasant boy, with varying levels of integration into the royal household, some residing in the Petit Trianon. Louis XV's agonizing death on May 10, 1774, from a virulent strain of smallpox contracted from a teenage courtesan named Mademoiselle O'Murphy or possibly the Duchesse de Châteauroux-Circle, his body so grotesquely swollen and blackened that it was buried without the traditional public viewing or autopsy at St. Denis to prevent an epidemic that had already claimed several courtiers, propelled the 19-year-old Louis XVI to the throne amid jubilant cries of "Le Roi est mort, vive le Roi!" echoing through Paris streets lined with hopeful crowds anticipating a break from his grandfather's scandals and fiscal profligacy. Inheriting a kingdom of 28 million souls, the most populous in Europe, stretching from the stormy Breton coasts to the Rhine's vineyards, with bustling ports like Marseille and Bordeaux driving Atlantic trade in sugar, coffee, and enslaved Africans but crippled by a 4 billion livre debt from colonial wars, 28 million livre annual pensions to courtiers like the Polignac family, and an inefficient tax system where fermiers généraux pocketed up to 40% of collections through farmed-out levies. Louis XVI was crowned on June 11, 1775, at Reims Cathedral in a medieval pageant costing 900,000 livres, anointed with the holy oil of Clovis from the Saint Ampoule under 1,000 flickering candles, swearing oaths to uphold justice while donning Charlemagne's crown and wielding Joyeuse, the legendary sword, in a ceremony attended by 6,000 nobles and clergy. Proclaiming his desire to be "loved by my people," in early declarations, he embarked on humanitarian reforms inspired by Enlightenment ideals, abolishing judicial torture and arbitrary imprisonment via lettre de cachet in August 1774, promoting smallpox inoculation by Edward Jenner after personally vaccinating his brothers and family in June 1774 despite ecclesiastical objections that it interfered with divine providence, granting non-Catholics like Protestants and Jews civil rights to marriage, property ownership, and legal status through the Edict of Versailles signed on November 7, 1787, and registered by the Paris Parliament on January 29, 1788, ending centuries of persecution since the 1685 revocation of the Edict of Nantes. Though full religious liberty awaited the 1789 declaration, he also humanized the military by abolishing the death penalty for deserters in 1788, replacing it with imprisonment, and supported scientific endeavors like the 1783 Montgolfier brothers' hot air balloon flights, attending demonstrations at Versailles. Recalling the 13 provincial parliaments, aristocratic judicial bodies exiled by Chancellor René Nicolas Charles Augustin de Maupeou in 1771 for obstructing taxes. On November 12, 1774, under the guidance of the cunning Comte de Maurepas, his de facto prime minister, recalled from 25 years of disgrace, proved a double-edged sword, restoring popular institutions but empowering noble judges to remonstrate against progressive edicts, setting a pattern of thwarted reform. Appointing the physiocrat and Robert-Jacques Turgot, former intendant of Limoges, who had constructed 500 miles of roads and combated famines by introducing potato cultivation, as Controller General of Finances on August 24, 1774, Louis endorsed the radical Six Edicts of January 1776, liberalizing the grain trade to prevent speculation following the 1770 to 1771 subsistence crises that saw bread riots in 200 towns, abolishing the corvée, the hated forced labor on royal roads exacted from peasants for up to 40 days annually, replacing it with a universal property tax on all classes, suppressing over 1,200 craft guilds to foster competition and innovation, and curtailing court expenditures like the 36 million livre upkeep of Versailles' 2,000 fountains and 5,000 servants. These measures ignited the Flower War of April-May 1775, with over 300 uprisings across the Paris Basin and Normandy, mobs looting 400 bakeries, mills, and granaries, storming Versailles' outer gates chanting "Bread or Blood," and "Vive le Roi sans Gabelle," suppressed by 25,000 troops under Marshal Biron at the cost of 157 arrests and 2 executions, while fierce opposition from nobles like the Prince de Conti, who decried the assault on privileges, and the parliaments, which refused to register the edicts, led to Turgot's forced resignation on May 12, 1776, after intrigues by Maurepas, Marie Antoinette, fearing impacts on Austrian grain imports, and Guillaume Chrétien de Lamoignon de Malherbe, who resigned in solidarity as minister of the royal household. Undeterred, Louis turned to Jacques Necker, a Protestant Swiss banker from Geneva whose wife Suzanne Kirchet hosted salons frequented by philosophes like Buffon, Diderot, and Marmontel, appointing him Director General of Finances on June 29, 1777, barred from Controller General due to his faith, who innovated with experimental provincial assemblies in Berry, 1778, and Haute-Guyenne, 1779, to decentralize tax assessment and reduce corrupt intendants' power, implemented rigorous accounting to curb embezzlement, and secured over 520 million livres in low-interest loans from Dutch and Swiss bankers, while his groundbreaking Compte Rendu au Roi, published in February 1781 in 20,000 copies as the first public financial statement, claimed a 10.2 million livre surplus by conveniently omitting 90 million in extraordinary military expenditures, restoring creditor confidence but later denounced by successors as misleading, culminating in Necker's dismissal on May 19, 1781, amid aristocratic snubs over his non-noble, Protestant status and demands for full ministerial inclusion in the Conseil d'État. Foreign Minister Charles Gravier, Comte de Vergennes, steered an aggressive policy of revanche against Britain for colonial losses, beginning with covert support for American revolutionaries in 1776 through playwright Pierre Beaumarchais' fictitious company Roderigue Hordelez etc., funneling 1 million livres in arms, powder, and uniforms shipped from Le Havre, formalizing alliances with the Treaty of Amity and Commerce signed February 6, 1778, with Benjamin Franklin, Arthur Lee, and Silas Deane in Paris, escalating to open war after the American victory at Saratoga, deploying naval fleets under Admiral Comte d'Estaing to the Caribbean and Atlantic, engaging in the indecisive Battle of Ushant on July 27, 1778, off Brittany with 30 ships clashing against Admiral Keppel's force, resulting in 500 French casualties, committing 6,000 ground troops under Comte de Rochambeau, who sailed from Brest in May 1780 aboard 32 vessels, enduring a 70-day voyage plagued by scurvy, and Admiral de Grasse's fleet of 28 ships blockading the Chesapeake Bay in the decisive siege of Yorktown from September 28 to October 19, 1781, where 8,000 French soldiers and Marines coordinated with George Washington's 9,000 Continentals to encircle and bombard Lord Cornwallis's 7,000 British troops, forcing surrender after 21 days of trench warfare and 88 French deaths. A triumph celebrated with illuminations in Paris and commemorative medals struck by the Monnaie de Paris, but at a staggering cost of 1.3 billion livres that ballooned the debt to 5 billion, yielding meager territorial gains like the islands of Tobago and Senegal trading posts in the Treaty of Paris signed September 3, 1783. Extending French influence globally, Louis forged a 1782 commercial treaty with Peshwa Madhvarav II of the Maratha Empire for expanded trading rights in Pondicherry and Chandernagore, a 1787 Treaty of Versailles with Vietnamese Prince Nguyen Phuc Anh, future Emperor Gia Long, promising 1,000 French troops and ships in exchange for ceding the island of Pulo Condor and trading concessions in Tehran, though the expedition was aborted amid revolutionary chaos, and patronized exploratory voyages. Like that of Jean-François de Gallup, Comte de la Pérouse, who set sail in August 1785 on the frigates La Boussole and L'Astrolabe with 220 crew, mapping Easter Island's Moai statues, Hawaii's volcanoes where he conducted the first European burial at sea for lost sailors, Alaska's glaciers, and the Samoan Islands before vanishing near Vanikoro in 1788, with wreckage discovered decades later by Dumont d'Urville. The 1780s unleashed a cascade of unrelenting calamities that exposed the regime's fragilities. The eruption of Iceland's Loki volcano on June 8, 1783, spewed 120 million tons of sulfur dioxide ash across Europe for 8 months, poisoning soils, killing 50% of livestock in France, and triggering crop failures that reduced grain yields by 25%. The brutal winter of 1783 to 1784 saw temperatures plunge to -20 degrees Celsius, freezing the Seine River solid for 60 days from December to February, halting 300 watermills, blocking barge traffic, and causing firewood shortages that led to 8,000 deaths in Paris alone from exposure, followed by catastrophic floods in spring 1785 along the Loire and Rhône valleys, submerging 2,000 villages, drowning livestock, and eroding farmlands, and the devastating hailstorm of July 13, 1788, when golf ball-sized stones pummeled a 500-mile swath from Rouen to Toulouse, shattering windows, killing birds mid-flight, and destroying 40% of the year's wheat and grape harvests, inflating bread prices in Paris from 9 to 14 sous per 4-pound loaf, a staple that consumed up to 80% of an artisan's daily 20-sou wage, sparking subsistence riots such as Grenoble's Day of the Tiles on June 7, 1788, where crowds hurled roof tiles at royal troops, killing 3, and the Revélin wallpaper factory riots in Paris on April 28 to 29, 1789, where 5,000 workers clashed with guards over wage cuts, resulting in 25 deaths and 25 wounded by musket fire. Societal cleavages deepened amid glaring inequalities. The First Estate's 120,000 clergy, divided between wealthy bishops earning 50,000 livres annually and poor curates on 700, controlled 10% of land generating 150 million livres tax-free from tithes on harvests. The Second Estate's 400,000 nobles, from sword nobility like the Montmorencys to robe nobility in parliaments, held 25% of territory extracting seigneurial dues such as champart, up to 20% of crops, banalites, fees for using lordly mills, ovens, and presses amounting to 10% of peasant income, and exclusive hunting rights that allowed game to ravage fields unchecked, while the Third Estate's 27 million commoners, peasants tilling 65% of land, artisans in guilds, and a rising bourgeoisie enriched by colonial ventures like the Nantes slave trade, shouldered the bulk of taxation through the taille. Direct land tax increased 14% since 1770 to 50 million livres, gabelle, salt monopoly at 6 sous per pound, evaded through smuggling but enforced with 2,000 annual arrests, aids, excise on wine and goods, and corvée labor, fostering widespread resentment amplified by Enlightenment critiques disseminated in coffeehouses and salons. Voltaire's Candide, 1759, satirized optimistic absolutism amid human suffering. Montesquieu's The Spirit of the Laws, 1748, advocated separation of powers to prevent despotism. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract, 1762, posited sovereignty in the general will of the people, and Denis Diderot's Encyclopédie, completed 1772 in 28 volumes, with 72,000 articles by 160 contributors, promoted rationalism and secularism, smuggled past royal censors who burned copies in public autos de fe. Cultural rebellions like Pierre-Augustin Caron de Beaumarchais' The Marriage of Figaro, banned in 1781 for mocking nobility with lines like, "Nobility, fortune, rank, all that makes one so proud. What have you done for such riches? You took the trouble to be born," but premiered to acclaim at the Comédie Française in April 1784 before 5,000 spectators over 68 performances, underscored growing defiance, while intellectual salons hosted by Madame Guillotine or Suzanne Necker buzzed with debates on equality and reform. Charles Alexander de Calonne, appointed Controller General on November 3, 1783, initially dazzled with courtly extravagance, granting 2 million livres in pensions to favorites like the Duc de Polignac and funding Marie Antoinette's 150,000 livre annual wardrobe of silk gowns and ostrich-plumed hats, while borrowing 653 million livres from Jean Van Banks at usurious rates to mask deficits, but by August 1786, facing imminent bankruptcy with interest payments absorbing 50% of revenue, he presented Louis with a bold memorandum proposing a universal subvention, territorial land tax on all estates, stamp duties on documents, and free internal trade to stimulate growth. Convening the Assembly of Notables on February 22, 1787, at Versailles, a hand-picked group of 147 elites including 7 princes of the blood like the Duc d'Orléans, 36 dukes and peers such as the Marquis de Lafayette, recently returned from aiding American independence, 12 ministers, and clergy led by Archbishop Loménie de Brienne. The proposals met with vehement rejection as assaults on sacred privileges, demands for full audits of Necker's accounts, and calls for convening the Estates General. Unused since 1614, leading to Calonne's dismissal on April 8, 1787, amid accusations of embezzling 50 million livres and his exile to Lorraine where he penned defenses like Requiescat au Roi. His successor, Étienne Charles de Loménie de Brienne, an enlightened but atheistic archbishop who had risen through church ranks despite skepticism, secured emergency loans of 67 million livres but pushed similar reforms, issuing edicts on May 8, 1788, to curtail the parliament's powers by establishing a plenary court for edict registration, igniting the parliamentary revolt or noble revolt with uprisings in 13 provinces. In Pau, protesters burned effigies of Brienne. In Rennes, Brittany's estates defied dissolution, and in Grenoble, the infamous Day of the Tiles on June 7 saw merchants and workers hurl ceramic roof tiles at troops from the Dauphiné regiment, wounding several and forcing retreat, symbolizing popular alliance with parliaments against ministerial despotism. With the treasury empty, unable to pay 160 million livres in maturing bonds, Brienne resigned on August 25, 1788, after declaring a suspension of payments on August 16, effectively admitting bankruptcy as interest consumed 318 million of the 582 million livre annual revenue. Louis, under public pressure, recalled Necker on August 26 and consented to summon the Estates General for May 1, 1789, postponed to May 5, doubling the Third Estate's representation to 648 deputies while maintaining 291 for clergy and 270 for nobility, but ambiguously leaving voting procedures, by order, favoring privileges, or by head, empowering commoners, unspecified, sparking a pamphlet war with over 4,000 publications, including Abbé Emmanuel Joseph Size's incendiary What is the Third Estate, in January 1789, arguing that the commoners constituted the true nation and should wield sovereignty. The preceding winter of 1788 to 1789, one of the harshest in centuries with temperatures dropping to -21 degrees Celsius in January, froze the lawyer and Seine for weeks, paralyzing mills, causing bread shortages that killed an estimated 170,000 from starvation and cold, prompting wolf packs to attack villages, and driving 25,000 nobles to emigrate early, while electoral assemblies compiled 40,000 cahiers de doléances, grievance lists demanding tax equity, abolition of lettres de cachet, press freedom, and regular estates meetings, reflecting a groundswell of hope and discontent. The Estates General convened on May 5, 1789, in Versailles' cavernous Hôtel de Menus Plaisirs amid a procession of 1,139 deputies attired by estate, clergy in flowing scarlet and violet robes, nobles in silk mantles with gold-plumed hats and swords, commoners in somber black suits and tricorns, where Louis's opening speech, delivered in a faltering voice emphasizing fiscal unity but avoiding procedural details, immediately bogged down in disputes over credential verification and voting methods. With Third Estate leaders like the Provençal noble-turned-commoner Honoré Gabriel Riquetti, Comte de Mirabeau, a charismatic orator burdened by 500,000 livres in debts from scandalous affairs, and lawyer Guillaume Joseph Sage advocating joint sessions and per head voting to leverage their numerical superiority against privileged orders' veto power. As deadlock persisted through May and June, Size's pamphlet galvanized resolve, and on June 17, 1789, the Third Estate, bolstered by 150 defecting clergy including Abbé Grégoire, proclaimed themselves the National Assembly, asserting sole authority to approve taxes and represent the nation's will. When locked out of their hall on June 20 ostensibly for preparations related to the Dauphin Louis Joseph's funeral, the 7-year-old heir had died agonizingly on June 4 at Meudon Château from spinal tuberculosis, his autopsy revealing twisted vertebrae and abscesses, a personal blow that left Louis XVI inconsolable amid state crises. They reconvened in the nearby Royal Tennis Court, a bare 78 by 38-foot hall with peeling walls, where astronomer Jean-Sylvain Bailly, elected president, administered the tennis court oath to 576 deputies standing with raised arms, vowing not to disband until France had a written constitution, a defiant scene later immortalized in Jacques-Louis David's 1791 sketch though left unfinished due to revolutionary shifts. Louis, influenced by hardline conservatives like his brother Artois and Queen Marie Antoinette's Polignac circle, convened a royal session on June 23 in the Menus Plaisirs, flanked by guards, declaring the Assembly's actions null and ordering the estates to meet separately, but the deputies' refusal, "We are here by the will of the people and will leave only at the point of bayonets," thundered Mirabeau, coupled with defections from nobles like Lafayette, forced Louis to relent on June 27. Commanding merger into a national constituent assembly. Tensions escalated as he amassed 4,000 troops under Marshal de Broglie around Versailles and Paris, stoking fears of a military coup, while Necker's dismissal on July 11, 1789, replaced by the reactionary Baron de Breteuil, ignited urban unrest, with orator Camille Desmoulins rallying crowds at the Palais Royal's cafés and gardens, leading to the storming of the Bastille on July 14. A medieval fortress symbolizing royal tyranny. Garrisoned by 82 invalids and 32 Swiss guards under Governor Bernard-René de Launay, holding just 7 prisoners including the mad Marquis de Sade, were 900 sans-culottes, armed with 30,000 muskets seized from the Hôtel des Invalides, besieged the towers with 2 cannons dragged from the arsenal, scaling walls amid gunfire that killed 98 attackers, beheading de Launay and parading his head on a pike through cheering streets, then demolishing the structure brick by brick as a symbol of liberation, an event now commemorated as Bastille Day with fireworks and parades. The Great Fear swept rural France from July 20 to August 6, 1789, fueled by rumors of aristocratic plots and brigand invasions amid harvest anxieties, inciting peasants in 80 departments to torch over 2,000 chateaux, burn feudal title deeds and tax rolls, lynch intendants and seigneurs in places like Franche-Comté, and seize granaries, prompting the National Assembly's night of patriotic delirium on August 4 to 5, where nobles like the Vicomte de Noailles and Duc d'Aiguillon renounced privileges. In euphoric speeches, abolishing serfdom, tax exemptions, venal offices, guild monopolies, and hunting rights, formalized in decrees from August 4 to 11, followed by the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen on August 26, drafted by Lafayette with input from Thomas Jefferson, proclaiming innate liberties, equality before the law, and the right to resist oppression in 17 articles that influenced constitutions worldwide. Persistent bread shortages, with prices at 20 sous per loaf amid speculation by bakers like Denis François accused of hoarding, culminated in the Women's March on Versailles on October 5 to 6, 1789, when 7,000 market women, fishwives, and revolutionaries, led by figures like Stanislas Maillard, a Bastille veteran, and Reynaud, a fruit seller, armed with scythes, pikes, and 2 cannons from the Hôtel de Ville, marched 12 miles in pouring rain chanting, "À Versailles." Dupain, spurred by inflammatory journals like Marat's L'Ami du Peuple, arriving at dusk, they invaded the assembly hall demanding relief, then stormed the palace gates at dawn on October 6, killing 2 royal bodyguards whose heads were impaled on spikes, forcing Louis to appear on the balcony promising grain supplies and endorsing the August decrees before the mob compelled the royal family's relocation to Paris, escorted by Lafayette's 20,000 National Guardsmen in a 6-hour procession. Mocked with songs like "We Bring the Baker," "The Baker's Wife," and "The Little Baker's Boy," installing them in the dilapidated Tuileries Palace, abandoned since Louis XIV era, under effective house arrest with 300 guards patrolling its overgrown gardens. The Constitution of 1791, promulgated on September 3 after 2 years of debates, transformed France into a constitutional monarchy, with Louis retitled King of the French, retaining a suspensive veto over legislation for up to 4 years, command of the armed forces, and foreign policy prerogatives, but sovereignty transferred to the nation. Executive power shared with ministers responsible to the unicameral legislative assembly of 745 deputies elected by active citizens, tax-paying males. Over 25, about 4.3 million of 7 million adult men, excluding passive citizens like women and the poor. Louis swore loyalty to the document on September 14 in a ceremony at the Manège Riding Hall, but his vetoes of November 1791 decrees, émigré property confiscation to fund the state and oaths for refractory priests refusing the July 1790 civil constitution of the clergy, which nationalized church land sold as assignats and made bishops elected, alienated radical factions in political clubs. The moderate Feuillants, meeting in a former monastery on Rue Saint-Honoré, advocated limited monarchy. While the Jacobins, in the old Dominican convent on Rue Saint-Jacques, with orators like Maximilien Robespierre, Georges Danton, and Jean-Paul Marat pushing for republic, gained influence through 1,000 affiliate societies nationwide. Secretly, Louis and Marie Antoinette conspired with émigré nobles in Koblenz and her brother Emperor Leopold II of Austria, smuggling letters via Swedish Count Axel von Fersen, rumored as the Queen's lover, who organized escapes, and allocating 2 million livres from civil list funds to counter-revolutionary efforts like Artois' Army of the Princes, while the August 27, 1791, declaration of Pillnitz by Leopold and Prussian King Frederick William II vaguely threatened intervention if the royals were harmed, misinterpreted as a war declaration. The Legislative Assembly, dominated by Girondins like Jacques-Pierre Brisset, declared war on Austria on April 20, 1792, with Louis's reluctant approval but private hopes that defeat would restore absolutism. Initial disasters, like the mutiny at Lille on April 29 where troops murdered General Dillon suspecting treason, and frontier routes amid 10,000 desertions, inspired the patriotic anthem La Marseillaise, composed by Captain Claude-Joseph Rouget de Lisle in Strasbourg on April 25 as chant de guerre pour l'armée du Rhin, sung by Marseillaise volunteers marching to Paris. The Duke of Brunswick's July 25, 1792, manifesto, commanding the allied Austrian-Prussian army, warned of razing Paris if the Tuileries were attacked, backfiring by inflaming revolutionaries. On June 20, 1792, a mob of 8,000 sans-culottes and National Guardsmen invaded the Tuileries, forcing Louis to don a red Phrygian liberty cap and drink to the nation's health for 3 hours amid jeers and pikes thrust at his chest, displaying stoic courage by refusing to lift his vetoes. The monarchy's collapse accelerated with the failed flight to Varennes on June 20 to 21, 1791, meticulously planned by Fersen with a custom 100,000 livre Berlin coach disguised as a Russian baron's vehicle, the family fleeing in servant's attire, Louis as a valet, Marie as a governess, but recognized at Saint Menehould by postmaster Jean-Baptiste Drouet from a coin likeness. Pursued and arrested at Varennes after 150 miles, returned to Paris amid silent, hostile crowds on June 25, destroying any illusion of loyalty to the Constitution and branding Louis a traitor in the eyes of radicals. The August 10, 1792, insurrection, orchestrated by Parisian sections and 2,000 faders from Marseille singing their anthem, stormed the Tuileries with 20,000 attackers against 900 loyal Swiss guards and 1,500 National Guardsmen, erupting in savage combat, cannons blasting the palace facade, bayonet charges in marble corridors, flames engulfing wings, resulting in 376 Swiss massacred in the gardens. their bodies mutilated and stripped, with total royalist losses of 600 and revolutionary casualties. Of 300, Louis, sheltering in the assembly with his family as bullets shattered windows, was suspended from functions, the monarchy effectively abolished. Imprisoned from August 13 in the temple's medieval dungeon tower, a grim fortress with 12-foot thick walls and moats, Louis occupied the second floor, teaching his son geography and Latin from smuggled books while Marie Antoinette was confined above, separated by vigilant guards like Commissioner Jacques-René Hébert. The September 2nd to 6th massacres, fueled by invasion paranoia after Verdun's fall, saw mobs slaughter 1,200 prisoners in abbeys and jails, sparing the royals but heightening terror. The National Convention, convened September 20, 1792, with 749 deputies elected under near-universal male suffrage, proclaimed the First Republic on September 21 after the cannonade victory at Valmy repelled invaders, incriminating documents from a hidden iron safe, armoire d'affaires, in the Tuileries, discovered November 20 by construction workers alerted by turncoat gamine, revealed Louis's bribes to Mirabeau, 990,000 livres from 1789 to 1791 to moderate the assembly, correspondence with foreign monarchs soliciting invasion, and payments to counter-revolutionaries, sealing treason charges. Stripped of titles and dubbed Citizen Louis Capet after the dynasty's 10th-century founder Hugh Capet, his trial began December 11, 1792, in the convention's Manège Hall, defended by advocates like Guillaume Chrétien de Malherbe, who volunteered at 72 despite risks, and Raymond de Sise, arguing constitutional inviolability and lack of intent. But prosecutors like Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just demanded death as a tyrant outside the law. Louis appeared twice, on December 11 and 26, stoically denying collusion while admitting contacts, but the evidence overwhelmed. After marathon debates, the convention voted January 15, 1793, 721-0 for guilt. On the penalty January 16 to 17, Girondins favored a public appeal or delayed execution, but Montagnards prevailed with 361 for immediate death against 360 for alternatives, including his cousin Philippe Égalité, formerly Duc d'Orléans, voting yes amid boos, confirmed without reprieve on January 19 by 380 to 310. On January 21, 1793, at 10:22 a.m., amid a foggy Place de la Révolution lined by 80,000 troops to thwart rescue attempts by royalists like Baron de Batz, Louis XVI, aged 38, ascended the scaffold in a white shirt and grey breeches, accompanied by his Irish-born confessor Abbé Henry Essex Edgeworth de Fermont, who whispered, "Son of St. Louis, ascend to heaven." His final words, "People, I die innocent. Gentlemen, I am innocent of everything of which I am accused. I hope that my blood may cement the good fortune of the French," were drowned by drumrolls as executioner Charles-Henri Sanson activated the guillotine, his head displayed to 20,000 spectators chanting, "Vive la République," with some dipping handkerchiefs in the blood as relics, his body carted to the Madeleine Cemetery and buried in a mass grave with quicklime to hasten decomposition. Marie Antoinette followed to the blade on October 16, 1793, their son Louis Charles, titular Louis XVII, perished in prison on June 8, 1795, from tuberculosis and neglect at age 10. During the Bourbon Restoration, his brother Louis XVIII ordered the exhumation on January 18, 1815, identifying the remains by a lock of hair, clothing fragments, and a garter, reinterring them with pomp in St. Denis Basilica on January 21, honoring him as a martyr king. Louis XVI's legacy, once derided as that of a weak, vacillating ruler overwhelmed by Enlightenment currents, economic inheritance, and revolutionary zealots like Robespierre, is now nuanced as a well-meaning reformer hindered by inexperience and circumstance, his execution shocking Europe, galvanizing counter-revolutions, and influencing global shifts toward republicanism. From the Haitian Revolution 1791 slave uprising to Latin American independences, embodying the perils of absolute monarchy. In an age of rising popular sovereignty, Louis XVI's downfall was precipitated by a litany of interconnected mistakes that exacerbated France's deep-seated vulnerabilities and alienated key constituencies. His inherent indecisiveness, fostered by an education that prized concealment over bold action and manifested in frequent ministerial churn, dismissing Turgot after 20 months for yielding to noble pressure, ousting Necker twice amid court factions, replacing Calonne with Brienne only to recall Necker, prevented the implementation of consistent, root-level reforms needed to address the fiscal abyss, allowing debt to spiral unchecked while vacillating between enlightened advisors and conservative influences like Maurepas, Vergennes, and Marie Antoinette's Austrian clique. He grossly underestimated the Ancien regime's structural inequities, inheriting but failing to decisively tackle a tax system that exempted clergy and nobility, opting instead for short-term loans that ballooned interest to 60% of the budget by 1788, burdening the Third Estate with regressive levies and inciting class resentment evident in the 40,000 caillots demands for equity. During the Estates General, his ambiguity on voting procedures, refusing to commit to per-head counts, and the deployment of 20,000 troops around Paris and Versailles signaled reactionary intent, eroding trust among moderates and empowering radicals in the National Assembly to seize initiative with oaths and declarations. Under the 1791 Constitution, his suspensive vetoes of popular measures against émigrés and non-juring priests appeared as deliberate obstructionism amid escalating war fears, further radicalizing the sans-culottes and Jacobins. His clandestine overtures to foreign powers, bribing Mirabeau with nearly 1 million livres, funneling 2 million to Artois exiles in Koblenz, and corresponding with Austria for military intervention to crush the revolution, were exposed as high treason through the armoire d'affaires documents, confirming public suspicions and providing irrefutable evidence at his trial. The disastrously executed flight to Varennes, intended to rally loyalist forces at Montmedy but foiled by simple recognition and Drouet's pursuit, irreparably shattered any pretense of commitment to constitutional rule, portraying Louis as a fugitive despot and accelerating calls for a republic. Compounding these political blunders was the royal family's perceived detachment and extravagance, Louis's immersion in hobbies like locksmithing and hunting during national crises, Marie Antoinette's construction of the idyllic Hameau de la Reine hamlet at Petit Trianon costing 2 million livres for faux farms and dairies where she played shepherdess, and the infamous 1785 affair of the diamond necklace, a 2 million livre fraud orchestrated by Jean de la Motte falsely implicating the Queen in Cardinal de Rohan's scam, amplified by libels like Madame Deficit in underground presses, crystallizing an image of callous indifference amid the 1788 to 1789 famine's estimated 170,000 deaths from starvation, ultimately dooming him to the guillotine as the revolution's inexorable logic demanded sacrificial accountability for centuries of monarchical excess.